So I think you really have a there's lots of opportunity everywhere because generally speaking, global tourism is growing. So there's a lot of opportunity for everyone and new players to come into the market. But the only thing I just say is that you need to know what you're doing, and the more you are going to the developing regions, the higher the risk factors become.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik Ruttmann. I have a very special guest, and we know each other for quite a few years since the time I was in Dubai, but we rarely meet in person, only except when we are bumping into each other on the industry trade show. So my guest today is Tea Ros. She's really a leading international hotel consulting professional, travels around the world, and now being in the busy season, she really revealed to me that she is traveling literally around the world, making deals and following up on opportunities. So she is the managing director of strategic hotel consulting. And she also served as the chair of the board of directors of International Society of Hospitality Consultants, a frequent speaker at major industry conferences. So if you follow Tea on LinkedIn, you can really see that she's been in Dubai, she's been all kinds of places speaking and invited to various panel discussions to give her professional advice and input and thought leadership on the hot buttons, what's happening in the industry. So really nice to have you, Tea, and thanks very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Sam-Erik. It's really nice to see you here. I was trying to remember, when did we actually meet? And I kind of want to say it might have been back in almost 20 years ago in Dubai. So it's nice that we've always kept in contact, and I think that's very reflective of our industry, that you meet the people along the way and they sort of become lifelong friends from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember our call, in fact, in Dubai. It was 20 years ago. My God, time flies, doesn't it? But let's just to share your background. I think it would be very interesting for the viewers and the listeners to, if you can tell about your professional experience, how you developed the career path and the journey you have taken to the point that you founded your own consultancy company.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been in the hospitality industry. So that's something that I studied it in the UK and then went and worked in hotel operations with Four Seasons, Rosewood and Starwood, and had the whole sort of operational background from the F&B to rooms, sales and marketing, revenue management. And then actually through Six Sigma with Starwood, that was a good leeway into the consultancy world, because that is already a very consultancy type of work. And I then moved on the consulting side back in 2004, I want to say, which was in Dubai when we also met then. So I worked for some of the bigger consulting group with TRI, Hospitality Consulting, and then with JLL in Asia. So I kind of came the operational route, then worked for the large consultancies, and then basically started my own shop, Strategic Hotel Consulting, back in 2010. And that was really out of necessity more than, let's say, interest, in the sense that I loved the consulting, I loved the hospitality, but I kind of had a problem because I also loved a man who was traveling a lot. So he worked in Formula One and he was all around the world. So I was trying to find a solution how I could have a life with him, to have that flexibility to travel, but then still do the consultancy and be within hospitality. So that's why I started my own business, and now it's been almost 15 years and still going strong.
Yeah, I mean, it has really worked out for you very well, that you have those contacts, and I think it's so important to also to have your private life in order, because the professional life can take a toll on, like it does on everyone who is working in this industry. So glad to hear that that's how it worked out for you. And you are based in Switzerland, am I correct?
Yes, exactly. So I emphasize the word based because I am traveling about 6 months of the year, but 6 months I try to make sure that I stay here, because actually I love it in Switzerland. So it's a country where I was born, so it's kind of like being back at home, and I love it here.
Yeah, well, skiing is not too bad there, right?
Exactly. So I try to time the 6 months so that it's over the summer time when you can go hiking and biking, and then over the winter when you can ski. And then the rest, I'm happy to travel. So that's why when we were organizing this chat, it's like I mentioned, I just came from Middle East. I'm about to leave to Central America, and this is the time to do it if you have to do it.
Yeah. Very good. So I was thinking that our conversation today would be talking about development and the investment side of things, and we'll touch on branding and at the latter part, and then the last part would be about some professional reflection, because I know that all of you who are now listening to this and you are still in the early part of your career, I think that Tea will be happy to share some of her insight of her professional career. And so with that in mind, so if it's all right, Tea, we will start in that point, and we start talk about development and investment trends and so on. I think one of the big things that happened to all of us and was the COVID, right? So the post-COVID period, and I understand that there has been such a shift on investments and shift on interest on urban properties to resort locations. So can you talk about the driving this change and how investors are adapting their strategies to suit these new trends?
Yeah, so it's such an interesting topic, Sam-Erik, because you can really say that the landscape has shifted like 180 from where we were before COVID, BC, before COVID. So it's kind of, prior to that, if I look at, for example, Switzerland as an example, this is where I know the market very well. Before COVID, all the investors were interested on the cities. So it was about having properties in Zurich, Geneva, maybe some secondary cities, but very rarely the resort locations. And this was also true for the other markets in Europe. So it was all about the key gateways in Paris, London, maybe Rome, Madrid, but no one was really paying attention to the resort space. And actually, if anything, it made the investors very nervous. So when you mentioned about resorts, the first thing that came up is that, oh, it's so seasonal and it's very difficult to have the sort of consistency in the business, and also risky. That was very viewed to be high risk field. Whereas then during COVID, of course, we saw a big shift in one of the first markets to recover. It was the resort destinations. And now we have more flexibility with the sort of work from home, work from anywhere type of lifestyles. So someone said to me the other day that it's the weekend starts in Thursday and it finishes on Tuesday for a lot of people now, meaning that they don't come to office other than maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, or maybe Thursday, and then the rest of the time they work from home, and that home may be a place in the mountains or a place somewhere on the countryside. So I think the resort markets have really benefited from the fact that people have a little bit more flexible lifestyles now. And also people like to be close to nature. So we've seen this huge interest towards resort markets actually everywhere, but in particular in Europe, when you look at the interest that's going towards Southern European markets, in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, it's just incredible because it's not only the private investors, but it's institutional investors, it's hardcore private equity guys who are all looking to be in that space, and they would have never looked at it before. So it's become very competitive in that segment, and we see it, of course, in Switzerland more from the alpine destinations. So places like Zermatt and many other destinations are some of the hottest markets in the country now. Wow.
So also from investors' point of view, if they have a choice, if they have to look at investing into Paris, to a really a central Paris, one of those historical buildings, and then they have a resort, I mean, there is quite a difference in how much they would have to spend in reinvesting into this and keeping it in top shape. I mean, it's I think is there getting into the resorts is cost a little bit less for them, right? I mean, there's in that sense, it makes sense nowadays that having a hotel in central Paris or central London is a very costly affair. And what are you hearing in the market from how investors think about this?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the big key gateways, Zurich, London, Paris, Geneva, they will always do well. There is always going to be, interest towards these places. We've been involved now since COVID in a couple of transactions in precisely those cities, and the pricing was incredible, well over $1 million per key, because that's just where these cities are, and I don't see that changing. You would be surprised, though, at what the pricing is in some of the top resort destinations. So if you look at, for example, Courchevel or Megève, Verbier, Zermatt, the price per key is not far off from what you would get in places like the cities, but you have a bit more range. So I think that you have, number one, a little bit smaller properties, so then the overall ticket sizes are maybe more in that 30 to 80 million range rather than on hundreds of millions. So I think that is one thing. And then just there's overall more space to do things. So there is still a little bit of new development, greenfield developments, and old stock that has been acquired, which can be redeveloped. So I think there's just a little bit more opportunities. The key gateways are still very high barriers of entry, and I think that's also pushed some of the investors to look at the resort markets.
Yeah. What is the situation in the US? Is there a slowdown in the US or in comparison to areas like in Europe?
I have no idea, Sam-Erik. The US it's one market. We have some clients from the US, but I actually try not to get involved in the market.
Okay.
So, joking aside, I think generally speaking, you hear about the slowdown within the US markets, but the interesting thing is when you look at the inbound to Europe, we've never seen the luxury segment as strong as it is at the moment. And why is it so strong? Because of the US travelers. 100%, they are the ones that are pushing up the rate in 2024. So certainly on the luxury segment, we don't see the slowdown yet. Maybe next year. Yeah.
Well, we were with my wife recently in Lisbon, and we noticed quite a few Americans there, and we noticed the prices. And then I told my friend that, we found it a little bit pricey in Lisbon, even though it was very nice. He said, well, you're a little bit 10 years too late for Lisbon. You should have gone a little bit earlier for that place. But now it's 2-hour queues for whatever you want to see. And then you have, of course, a substantial amount of elderly Americans traveling from Florida to experience this area. So I can understand that. Yeah, I don't hear so much about the U.S. I know there's always going on something there, but I hear about there are resort developments that are some exotic resort development that are going on that are of interest to a lot of investors at the moment. So seems to have some little bit similarities to what you are talking about. But maybe the areas of other continents like Asia, Central America, South America. Could you speak about the growth opportunities from your experience and the clients that you have?
Yeah. So we work across Asia, Middle East, Central America, a little bit in Africa, in places like Zanzibar. Also, although that tends to be more with clients that are from Middle East or Europe. I'd say that all of those regions, they have huge growth potential, and they are very interesting regions to be part of. You really need to know what you're doing. So if you take Asia, for example, I just came back from Vietnam, which is it's a very interesting market because the overall growth of the country is so strong, and you really have the middle classes that are now starting to travel. It's incredible, that growth. There's a lot of hotel stock available at the moment, because a lot of developers, there was corruption issues and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity at the moment, but you really need to know what you're doing to navigate through that landscape and the sort of how it works with the regulation and so forth. And I don't think that is that different for the other places. On Middle East is similar. You have pockets of hotspot. Obviously, everybody is looking at Saudi Arabia at the moment. Now comes the time when they really need to start delivering on those promises. So it's the next 3-4 years will be very interesting for Saudi Arabia. But then the other markets that we don't talk about so much, like Oman, they're doing pretty good too. So. Yeah. So I think you really have there's lots of opportunity everywhere because generally speaking, global tourism is growing. So there's a lot of opportunity for everyone and new players to come into the market. But the only thing I just say is that you need to know what you're doing. And the more you're going to the developing regions, the higher the risk factors become. So even more so, you really need to understand what you're getting into.
Yeah. How do you see Northern Europe? I happen to be in Helsinki, but what's your view looking at from that angle in terms of developments and opportunities?
Yeah. So did you know, Sam-Erik, that I have a little summer house in Lapland?
Oh.
So, yes, it's
lovely.
So I'm a big fan of the northern space, but I actually think that there is going to be more interest towards it. And the reason is the climate change. So when you look at what has happened in Southern Europe in the past, 5 to 10 years now, we have had summers that are just unbearable in, June, July, August. If you are in many of the traditional holiday destinations in Southern Europe, you're looking at 40 degrees plus, and that's just not a comfortable temperature to be in anymore. So I've seen some of the data how sort of, for example, search engine inquiries for Iceland, for Lapland, these have really sort of skyrocketed in recent years because people are looking for cooler experiences where to go to. And I think the Nordics will do very well in this regard. That's maybe more reflective of the Lapland and the northern part. I think on the city level, as I understand, there is, at least on some of the cities, there's been quite a lot of supply, so it's nearly an oversupply situation now. So I think they have a lot of capacity to take on more tourists. What do you think?
Well, I think that the city situation, particularly Helsinki. I mean, Copenhagen and Stockholm are doing well, but Helsinki is having an oversupply, undersupply of conventions, undersupply of people traveling year round. So there's an increase of 50% in room keys into Helsinki, which is unheard of. And on that side, it's very there is only one international brand in Helsinki at the moment. The rest are local players. There are you have in 1 kilometer range, you have 10 hotels of the same brand. So if I would be a visitor to Helsinki, I would be quite confused of which XYZ brand I should stay at, because they don't really are different from each other. But I think that I have noticed difference in, we made a search into the various municipalities of Finland to check out what kind of access to different land plots are available. So the first location was Arctic Lapland. The second one was Lake District. Third one was Archipelago, meaning islands and so on. And fourth was the city of and the surroundings of city of Helsinki and maybe Tampere and Turku. And we identified about 100 different locations or plots. And now I'm looking at the different, and obviously the Arctic Lapland is very attractive because there is such a huge interest. But there's also something going on in the archipelago, but I think it'll take time. But the Arctic Lapland, even certain international brands are looking for projects and where they can operate the hotel, because they are also, their customers are like to have a holiday in areas which are in cooler climates. So I think we see a very good future for Arctic Lapland. and the flight, I mean, the connectivity to Lapland is excellent at the moment. You cannot, I think about 30 or 40 flights per day to Rovaniemi and etc. and also Ivalo. And so they are having they will do very, very well. And but I'm worried about is the capital, because they have some work to be done, and since we don't have a system of any Ministry of Tourism like certain countries have, don't feel that anybody taking full responsibility except for a government office that covers not only tourism but cover other industries, and the tourism doesn't seem to be high on their agenda. So we have some work to be done on that area. But I think now there's also a development into northern Sweden also, and Iceland is actually quite interesting because people find Iceland very exotic. It's in the news for all kinds of reasons, and there are hotel developments. Reykjavik is actually a very small town, so but there are some other areas there. So yeah, I think I'm quite positive about this. Not in the same range and numbers as the other exotic locations, but definitely I think we can contribute to the general growth in tourism for sure.
Yes, I think so as well. Many years, well, not so, maybe 2018 or 17, we did a project in Lapland, and already that time you could see it in the numbers that it was really looking great, and there was already then interest from the international operators to be there, and I think that has just multiplied after the COVID, so it really is, it's very, very hot. It has another thing going for it, which is really important in today's world, and it is that it's very Instagrammable as a location. So you have this nature, which is really beautiful to experience at any time of the year, actually, but it's also very Instagrammable, meaning you can get some amazing photos and videos, and then they just look fabulous. So when people post them online, all of a sudden they go viral, and you have in all of these countries these small properties that became really famous because of, someone's Instagram videos, and then all of a sudden you get this big following of people coming. So it's almost like they are doing the work of the tourism authorities now to draw people in.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, example, there is a hotel called Arctic Treehouse outside Rovaniemi, and then you have some social media giants like Kardashians staying few nights in the hotel, and then they just sit on the bed and take a picture of what it looks like to look through the window, and then it gets about 1 million clicks. So yeah, you don't need a Ministry of Tourism for that. So that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a really big. It makes a big difference these days.
Yeah. I think but one of the challenges, of course, I see in the Nordics is which actually leads into contracting, the business model and hotel contracts, and the high-end luxury brands are only interested to come in. I mean, the ones I know about at the management agreements, they're not interested in the good old Finnish model where you have lease agreements or you pay rent every month to the landlord and so on. Do you see any changes in that? Maybe not in Finland itself, but generally, how flexible have you found brands being when they're having the luxury brands? So, what kind of contracts are they prepared to make with the owners?
I'd say that it all depends how good the hotel is. If it's a really interesting property, there is a surprising amount of flexibility that can be found. But that's an exception for those really exceptional properties. I think in general, you're absolutely right that in Europe, we still have some countries like Germany is the same, where the lease model has been the prevalent model for such a long time, and when you're looking at new brands coming into the market, they are just not comfortable with that. So I think there are other countries that struggle with the same thing. I think in general there's been a little bit of a shift on the branding space, in the sense that a lot of the international groups are moving more towards the franchise model. So if we go back to, let's say, Middle East, when you and I were there 20 years ago, precisely signing the management agreements, they were always management agreements. Yeah. So they were never franchise agreements or leave alone leases. Now, all of those are happening within the market space of Dubai today. So I think the market has matured. There's a lot more third-party white label operators that then do a sandwich together with the franchise. And you have also some lease agreements now. So the market has definitely matured. I think in Europe, where there was a lot more focus on management agreements before, it's moving more towards the franchise. And the franchise is also working very well for the owners who have been running the hotels independently for a long time. So they know what they're doing, but they could do with a little bit of help from the distribution engine and the platforms of the brands. So I think all of the big groups, they realize this, and they're putting a lot more efforts into their franchising model now.
Okay. Can you speak a little about the hotel branding? There seems to be the usual suspects are, and there's a brand proliferation. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is not good, but and there's some confusion about large hotel companies are taking over brands which were independent. And can you talk a little bit about the effects this has now in the market, and maybe hotel owners and consumers, and how industry might address this issue?
Yeah. Too many brands, Sam-Erik. I think that's the short answer. It's just, it's hard to keep up. Yeah. So it's, I was actually with an owner yesterday, and we were discussing about the brands, and they kept on coming back to me, and they're like, does this brand belong to this group now? And I was like, yes, it does. And then another one is like, does this belong to them now? So it's become very, very convoluted. And it even happened to me a couple of months ago that even a person working for the brand forgot which brands do they actually have. So there's been a lot of movement within that space over the past 10 years, let's say, but especially over the past 5 years. And Accor has obviously acquired so many of the smaller brands under their lifestyle umbrella and many other umbrellas. And if it hasn't been a full acquisition, then there is some sort of a partnership, like with Banyan Tree and Xana. So it's very difficult actually for owners and consumers to stay on top of what brands belong to what groups. And to be very honest, even for people like myself as consultants, it's also difficult for us to know exactly what landscape it is to understand all of the arrangements that the brands have. So I think in general, there has been a lot of consolidation in the sense that you really have the big five now, and majority of the brands are coming under their umbrellas, and they each have 30, 40, 50 plus brands.
Yeah. I mean, I always ask for the brand book from development person to understand, because the name and the brand name doesn't mean so much anything to me. I want to see the brand book, I want to see the look book, I want to understand what are their minimum standards, or do they have maximum standards, what are they looking for before I can even start to discuss with a hotel owner about discussing a possible brand. And I found the positive thing is that they're quite open to pass on this information, which I found very useful, because I said that this will help me to help you in the future.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I think as much as the landscape has become more complex, that there is still value in the brand. So I think we do need to recognize that once you go through the exercise, and if you do a good job in selecting the right brand for the property, it really adds a lot of value. So I think it's just that process of selecting the right brands and negotiating the right contracts, that has become more complicated. But the brand value itself, I don't think that has diminished.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from the time that what would be, how many percent would be the value of the building if you have the right brand flag on top of the building, and at one time it was 20% you could add on top of the asking price. I don't know if that holds true anymore, but that was what we were usually were quoting when we talked to the owners, that what they could expect.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a similar range when you look at the branded residency space, which has become huge in recent years. And when you look at the brand premiums of having a branded product versus a non-branded one, it's in that 25-30% category on average. So it can really make a big difference for a project.
Yeah. Interesting about this development outdoor accommodation trends. And you're on an advisory board for a relatively young brand, an independent player. What are your thoughts on the trend of larger hotel companies are acquiring these outdoor and experiential brands, and how does it impact the originality and customer experience? I mean, if you just want to look at these that are in exotic location in Africa or somewhere, you have these beautiful experience tent accommodations and so on. But when you put a large hotel chain in charge of that, does it still work, or you think there is some value in trying to stay as independent as you can?
Yes. So I think my general view on that is approach with caution. So I think you're absolutely right that the whole outdoor lodging accommodation has become such a big theme in it's not even over the COVID, it was even started before that already. And you had some of these, what we used to call the glamping accommodation, and they were very popular. So you had the Four Seasons tented camps in Chiang Rai that must have opened maybe 25 years ago. So there are some properties that were way ahead of the curve, and then it's just sort of caught more on the wider consumer over the past 10, 15 years. People wanted to be more in the outdoors. You see this obviously in Africa with a lot of the lodging, safari lodges, but then also elsewhere. So actually Lapland is one of the places where you had a lot of the igloo type accommodation for that, and in Middle East we've tried to see it with some tented accommodation in the desert space. So it's a beautiful way to experience the nature and the outdoors of the destination that you are in. And as you mentioned, I'm on the advisory board of Envy Lodges, which is one of the, I would like to say, only brands who purely specialize on that. So they really have a very clear brand ethos, what they want to be, and they've been very, very successful so far in that space. They opened now their first property in Tanzania, and there's lots more on their pipeline ready to go. So I think the interest has been phenomenal towards this segment. And because the segment has performed very well, and because the construction costs are relatively low, it's attracted a lot of interest from the investors as well. So you have had even some of the bigger private equity guys like KSL, they've gone into acquiring some of the groups. Of course, you have the brands that are knocking on the doors, so they would be very keen to acquire this type of accommodation. But I think for many of the owners, they've chosen to not go with the brands, at least at this point, because they felt that it was compromising on why they created the brand and what they wanted to achieve with it. So I think the proposition has to be very attractive for the brands to go with the bigger groups, and maybe it has to be some sort of an arrangement where you kind of are part of the bigger group, but then they let you to do your own thing because you've been successful. So if you look at the Auto Camp, for example, which got acquired by Hilton quite recently in the US, that's more the format they are going for, and I could see that becoming more common.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah, Envy Lodges is on the rise with good people, and they have a very interesting locations where they're developing. So I'm sure they will do very, very well. Particularly because they are nice people, so that makes it very important who you're dealing with. This maybe we can shift now to our latter part of advice for young professionals. I mean, you have years of experience and in this profession. You started in operation, and you have done the thing that many hoteliers could dream of. You have done almost like a full circle here. What advice would you give for somebody in the beginning of their career? How should they get started, and how should they go about developing a career in hospitality? Just sort of maybe you can reflect on how you did it.
I think everybody's path is different, and I think you have to embrace whatever path it is that is shaping out for you, and it may look different from someone else's, and that's fine. I think the one thing I would say is that we are all very lucky to be in the hospitality industry, and if someone is listening to it and is thinking about maybe coming into hospitality industry, do it. Definitely do it, because it's an amazing industry to be part of for many reasons. One reason is that the people are incredibly nice. So it doesn't matter in what capacity you are working, whether it's in operations or you're on the corporate side or maybe consultancy, but generally speaking, the people are really, really nice that you are interacting on a daily basis. And when you're working with nice people, it automatically means that you have nice days. And then the nice days turned into nice years and nice decades and eventually a nice career. So I think the people aspect of the business is really something very special. The other thing I'd say is that it's an industry of growth and promise, in the sense that everywhere in the world, tourism is still growing. So this is one of the industries that you have lots of opportunities, lots of growth for personal development. And also, if you are someone who is interested in seeing the world, this is the best way to do it, because you have tourism everywhere. It's a highly interconnected industry across the world. So it's a fantastic industry to be part of if you have desire to travel and see the world.
Yeah.
But I think from my sort of own experience and how my path has shaped out, I think the main thing really to keep in mind is to just enjoy the journey, because it's not like one day you have you reach your mountaintop, what you were dreaming of and all that. It's actually the journey along the way that counts. And sometimes when you're young, you're very sort of ambitious and you're a little bit in a rush to reach to the next step. And I think that's the one thing I'd say, is to just enjoy every experience and opportunity that comes along the way. And I loved my days in operations. It wasn't that this was a stepping stone to go into consulting. It was important to do it so that I can go into consulting, but I loved it. It was amazing having all that dynamic sort of ambience and the guest experiences and interactions. And then on the other side, with the consultancy, I've loved it as well. So I think you just have to kind of enjoy the journey and take the opportunities as they come. Yeah.
Well, I just maybe are repeating the question in the sense that if you, maybe you have the same answer, but I thought I'd ask you again, that looking back, what you know now, what advice would you have given your younger self, considering what you have learned throughout your career, and particularly you have the tremendous experience already, but if you would have to give it to your younger self when you got started, what advice would you give yourself at this point?
I think I'd probably say chill out. That would be the first thing. So it's okay to relax a little bit as well. So I think the first thing I would say is to just chill out and trust the process. So I think that as long as you have some sort of a goal in mind, then as long as you enjoy the process of getting there and have trust in being able to get there at its own time, it may take a year or 10 years. I think that would be the important thing, so that you don't get too caught up on the, daily drama and things that are actually quite insignificant in the bigger scheme of things, and sort of have your eyes and your sort of goal somewhere in the future, but then also enjoy the present moment, because that's where the magic happens. Sure.
How do you balance ambition with humility in your professional life? Because I think you must have both of it at some point.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, humility it's something that it's very inbuilt. So it's not even in relation to a career, but it's also in relation to a character. And certainly for me, that was something that I learned from home. And I think I've always kept the level of sort of humility, regardless of what happens in your career or other aspects of your life. And I think the older you get, you also realize that we all stumble, we all have, moments where everything falls apart a little bit, and, you just get up and you dust yourself off a bit and off you go again. So I think that it's sort of the trying and failing is part of the business, and you just have to accept it and sort of keep going.
Yeah. Having a mentor is very important if you have during your career. But maybe for you, who has been the most influential mentor in your journey, and what has been sort of the best lesson that person or they taught you?
Yeah, I'd say I would give a lot of credit to my parents. I think just from the point of view that they have been very supportive of my choices in my career and in my life. Not maybe the most conventional choices. I moved to study in the UK by myself when I was 15 because I wanted to have an international career, and they let me go. And I moved to Dubai in the middle of the Iraq war, and I had never even been there before, and they let me go. So I think having parents that instill in you this the sky's the limit mentality, that you're really allowed to have your own dreams and then to try to go and reach them, whether it is that you fail or you don't fail, but at least you try. I think this is actually very important, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah.
But what I would say about the mentoring in general is that what I've learned career-wise, but then also in general in life, that I think there's a saying like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So, and it means basically that it's you can have any sort of formal mentoring relationships you want, but end of the day, you have to be open to receive the advice. And when you are open to learn from others, you can learn from every interaction that you have in the world. And it doesn't have to be someone who is higher up or achieved a lot. You can learn a lot from every interaction that you have. So I think I try to always keep an open mind that every person you meet, you have something interesting to share with them, and we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. And how do you maintain a sense of purpose and passion in your work over time? Because you must be passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, I think having the passion is something that if you find it early on in your life from your career, that's fantastic. And I don't take it for granted that for me that was the way. I loved the travel, I loved the people, I loved hotels. And so the passion has always been there, and it hasn't actually changed. I know that for a lot of people, it may take them a long time to find that. And sometimes you have to do a career change and try something different. The way I always say it, and I also do it myself, is to experiment. So you don't have to completely just pack it up and do a radical change in your life. You can maybe try to experiment. So if you are interested in languages, you can maybe start a sort of a course that you do over the weekends, or if you want to do something else, maybe do some evenings where you are, working within that field, or something like this where you are experimenting. Because what I've learned is that there are certain things where you think, oh, I think I would really like to be a kitesurf teacher. And then you go and you live somewhere where they live for a month, and you're like, no, actually, I like my life in Switzerland. So I think the possibility to experiment is very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the kind of interesting that you left for UK to study and so on. I mean, I had a similar situation. I left Finland to US to get my studies, and my parents were very supportive. but I also I have never been afraid to take on an assignment, and particularly I thrived if there was something I didn't know about, because I'm curious by personality, so I was keen to learn something new. But I remember one of my first assignments was to Kuwait. I didn't realize that Iran and Iraq had a war, and so I just went there. But the hotel was nice. It was probably the most beautiful hotel I ever worked at. It's all Carrera marble, fountains and hanging plants inside, and very cool. And the most beautiful wedding reception rooms and so on. But there was a war going on in a small country. My parents said that, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, it's very quiet here. We don't have any tourists, but people are still enjoying life, and they are having their receptions. So we are managing somehow." But I was never afraid to take on that kind of assignment, and I'm still grateful for that opportunity given.
Yeah. I think that's also important in general, that when someone offers an opportunity, then say yes, and then figure out how you're going to do it and what does it really mean and all that. But you never know. So I think that to keep an open mind towards things. I was also the sort of, if there was an assignment that nobody wanted to do, throw it to Tea and she'll probably do it. That was kind of how I was probably known in the office in the past. But you always learn. So no assignment is wasted. You always learn something.
Yeah, well, Tea, this has been a very nice discussion and conversation with you, and long overdue, in fact. So, but now for all the viewers and listeners who want to connect with you, well, how can they connect with you, and what would be the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way in this day and age is to go on LinkedIn, and you'll find me there under Tea Ros Strategic Hotel Consulting, and connect me with there, and then I'm happy to have conversations.
Very good. Well, Tea, thank you very much for joining today's episode. Thanks for all the fantastic insight, and I learned quite a few things about you today also. So thank you so much.
Very nice to speak to you, Sam-Erik, like always, and wish you a good week.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the podcast episode. So how did you find it? How did you find the conversation? It's not recorded anymore.
Okay, we're off. Yes.
We're off. Because it was all bullshit.
No. It was great. Yeah, very good. Good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I will. It's going to publish it probably in a month or so. It's going to come out. So I'll let you know in advance. So.
Yeah. I look forward to it. It's and thanks for doing this. It's nice that you're bringing some industry people for people to listen to. It's very valuable work.
Well, I was talking because I'm contacted by podcast agencies, so they are usually they have people who want to become guests on other people's podcasts. So somebody called me, or I called them for a discussion, and I learned from them that they are looking at the top 10 podcasts in certain niche segments, certain segments where it's financial law or health or mindfulness and so on. But in hospitality, there's not that many. So I'm proud to be one of within that 10%, in particular in this industry. And it's a niche channel, but I also don't isolate myself trying to bring only hotel managers to talk about bragging about their occupancies and so on. I want to bring people from different aspects of things, and my next episode coming out on Saturday is with two Ghanaian entrepreneurs who went to US to study, in fact in Cornell. They go back to Accra, and they're creating a new bar scene that made a huge hit into the city, which they never existed before, concept-wise. And what's fascinating is that they're opening their first, it's called Bloom Bar, that's the name of it in Accra. They're opening their first Bloom Bar in Atlanta, Georgia. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow.
That's what I learned having a half an hour talk with these guys.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, I look forward to listening to that episode.
Yeah. All right, yeah, well, hey, many thanks. And let's keep in touch. And let's talk about Lapland one of these days.
Yes.
If I find something interesting for you.
Yeah, let me know. Always happy to talk about it.
Okay. Bye-bye. Take care.
Sam-Erik. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Social Hotelier. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button that they stay updated. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming your way, so stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.